Hello students, Mr. Sims here. We've got Mod 6, which is what we're going to finish up this year. This is preparation for what you will be starting off with when you start 8th grade math next year. In day 1, we're going to talk about how we would simplify before solving an equation. So the lesson objective would be I can simplify before solving. Okay. So the warm-up, actually, we did on Schoology, so we won't be going through those problems. Okay. And the opening example we've already kind of done together, so it should be filled in. So we're going to go to the next page, example 1. All right, and if we're numbering these pages, this would be page number 2, as I realize I did not number any of these pages. So I'll kind of be numbering these pages as we go through. So in example number 1, there's basically two things. When we're simplifying an equation, we talk about distributing and combining. So we have to do them in a specific order. You have to distribute before you combine if they happen to both show up in here. So in the first example, we're just going to practice how to solve an equation using the distributive property. So I've got A, B, and C, and then the checkpoint will be exercise number 1, in which you will check your answers to determine if they're correct, obviously. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is solving using the distributive property. Well, it's pretty straightforward. You just distribute. So you would go, and it only goes, you only go down the 5, gets distributed only to what's in the parentheses. Okay, it does not go to the 15 over here. So we get 5a plus 60 equals 15. All right, and then from here, you solve it just like we solve a two-step equation. So you subtract 60 from both sides. You get 5a equals, now careful with your signs here, 15 minus 60 is negative 45. And when you divide both sides by 5, also what you're going to notice with these equations that we're working on here now is you're going to see a lot more negatives, which before we didn't really do a whole lot with the negatives. But negatives will be a big part of 8th grade equations next year. Okay, so you have a negative 45 divided by negative 5, which will give you a negative 9. And that's really all there is to it. Here's a second one, just as another. Distribute the 2. Okay, 2 times 3x would be 6x, and 2 times 2 would be 4, equals negative 8. Right. Most of the mistakes you're probably going to make are be with signs, so I'm going to subtract 4. Careful when you subtract 4 here. Remember what happens when you combine two negatives. If I take a negative 8 and I combine it with a negative 4, it becomes more negative. Remember that rule is you add and you keep the sign. Okay. Also, you can think of the integer card game. If I have these two cards, the value is negative 12. Divide 6 here, and we get x is equal to negative 2, because you take a negative 12 divided by 6. Right. Okay, then the third one, and this one I put a negative out front because we have to remember what happens when we distribute a negative. So I take a negative 2 times b would be negative 2b. And I take a negative 2 times a negative 4. Remember, a negative, and this minus means it's a negative 4. Becomes a plus 8 equals 12. Okay, so we subtract 8 from both sides. You get negative 2b is equal to 4. And you're dividing by negative 2. And that's the one thing that sometimes you'll see that minus sign in front of the 2. And you'll think, oh, I've got to add 2. But no, it's a negative 2 times b. And that second step is usually always division. Divided by negative 2, so we get b is equal to negative 2. Okay. All right, so your first checkpoint will be to work through these examples here, and then checking the answers as we go. I will also give you those answers so you can check to see if you're doing them correctly. Just watch your signs, like especially on this one here. And there's a sign there you got to worry about. Here there's a sign there, so you just got to be really careful. And don't be afraid to use a calculator if you need to. Oh, and you should be hitting pause and working on those problems first. All right, now that we're back, example 2. Now we're going to talk about solve by distributing and combining. So remember combining like terms. So in A, if you look, there's no parentheses, so there's no distributing that has to happen, but there is some combining that has to happen. So I can combine the 3z with the 2z. Gives me 5z plus 8 equals 28. Okay, and then from here, subtract 8 from both sides. Now, sometimes some of you want to know what kind of steps can you skip. So some of you like to kind of shortcut things. So you can actually, instead of writing -8, you can actually just skip right to the next step. And you can just go 5z equals 20. You don't have, once you get really good at this, you don't necessarily have to write out every single step. Okay. Divide by 5 here, z is equal to 4. So essentially what's happening is every time we're getting down to a two-step equation. And that's the work that we're doing. We're cleaning it up to get down to a two-step equation. All right, B. B's going to have a little bit of both. So we've got to distribute. So the 4, and it only gets distributed to what is inside the parentheses. This 2 that's over here, that doesn't get distributed to. So here we have 4x minus 4 minus 2 equals -6. Now we will combine, and we can combine these here at the end. So we get 4x. Remember what happens when you combine two negatives. -4 combined with -2 is -6 equals -6. And then from here, I'm going to add 6 to both sides. 4x is equal to 0. Okay, and when you divide by 4, you get x is equal to 0. All right, so we actually get 0 on that one. Okay, but basically, from here down, it's no different than what we've been doing pretty much for the beginning of the year. All right, C. C is one that's very interesting, and it's a common one that students will mix up because the question is what gets distributed. So some students will take this 10z and try to distribute the 10z to both of this, but the problem is it's the minus sign. Okay, and if you want, you can even put a 1 there. Okay? And what gets distributed is the minus sign. And when you distribute a negative, okay, you get 10z. Here you get minus 3z and a negative. So you're subtracting a positive 11. Becomes -11 equals 17. All right, and then from here we combine. You have your z's together. 10z minus 3z is 7z. Minus 11 equals 17. Okay, if I add 11 to both sides, 7z would equal 28. Divide both sides by 7, I get z is equal to 4. Okay, then your second checkpoint would be this exercise, which is really exercise number 2. And from there, after that, is the fluency page that's on the next page, which would be numbered 4. And I'm going to have you guys number these pages as we go. So, all right, for recorded lessons, this is Mr. Sims signing off.